Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into today's story. Today, we have a story about a man who seems to have it all, but is slowly losing control of his life and legacy. A successful millionaire, but still, there's something missing in his life. Let's take a look at his journey, which begins with a proposal he never saw coming. Mark Davis was your average college student. At 23, he was struggling to finish his law degree while working part-time at a local coffee shop. His life was a whirlwind of classes, bills, and debt. The weight of his late father's financial mess was still very much on his shoulders. His phone buzzed one afternoon, interrupting his busy day. It was an unexpected call. A voice on the other end spoke with an unusual calmness. "Mr. Davis, this is Eleanor Brooks. I'd like to meet with you. It's about your financial situation." Mark paused. "Who is this?" he asked, confused. "I know about your debts," she replied smoothly, "and I know you're barely making ends meet. I want to help." His brow furrowed. "How do you know about me?" he questioned, but the voice on the other end was unwavering. "Let's meet at Brooks Bistro at 7 p.m. It's important." The call ended before he could respond. His mind raced. Who was this Eleanor Brooks? How did she know so much about him? And what could she possibly want? By the time Mark arrived at the bistro, the rain was falling harder, the streets slick with water. He was drenched and shivering as he stepped inside the warm cafe. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, contrasting sharply with the cold that still clung to his skin. At a corner table, he found Eleanor waiting for him. She was a striking woman, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. She looked up from her tablet and smiled faintly as he approached. "Mr. Davis," she greeted him smoothly, motioning for him to sit. "Thank you for meeting me." Mark hesitated before sitting down, still unsure about the situation. "What's this about?" he asked, his voice low. Eleanor took a sip of her tea before setting it down. "I'm here to offer you a solution. I know your situation, your debts, your struggle." She leaned in slightly. "I can pay off your debts, ensure your financial security. In return, you'll marry me." Mark blinked. "Marry you?" he repeated, shocked by the unexpected proposal. "Yes, I'm offering you a business arrangement," Eleanor said, her tone steady and calm. "I need a companion, someone to share my name, my estate. It's not about love. It's about control. And in return, I'll secure your future." Mark sat in stunned silence. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Why me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're young, unattached, and desperate enough to consider this," she replied, her eyes locking onto his with an unsettling intensity. "I need this, and so do you." Mark's mind raced. He knew this was insane, but the offer was too tempting to ignore. The weight of his debt, his mother's medical bills, his sister's tuition, everything was crashing down around him. Could he really say no to this? "I'm asking you to marry me. Think of it as a contract. A business deal," she said, her voice softening just a touch. Mark swallowed hard. "I need time to think about this." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping across the floor. Eleanor nodded calmly, but there was something in her gaze that told him she wasn't going to let this go. "Of course," she said smoothly. "Take your time. But don't take too long. The offer doesn't stand forever." Mark left the bistro, the rain soaking his clothes, his mind spinning. Could he really marry a woman he barely knew, just for money? And yet, the temptation of finally being able to solve his financial problems was hard to resist. What would he do? Mark returned home that evening, his mind still spinning from the conversation with Eleanor Brooks. He could barely focus on the rain-soaked streets as he trudged up the stairs to his small apartment. Inside, the dim light flickered from the old lamp on his kitchen table, casting long shadows on the walls. Mark dropped his backpack on the floor and collapsed into the chair, staring at the ceiling. The weight of his father's debts, his mother's mounting medical bills, and the pressure to make something of himself all seemed to crush him further. He couldn't shake Eleanor's offer. Marry her, a woman he barely knew, just to fix everything. Was it really that simple? Could he just sell his future to escape this nightmare? The thought gnawed at him. He sighed deeply, reaching for his phone and checking the time. It was still early, But the idea of going back to the bistro tonight seemed unbearable. Yet, the reality of his situation pressed against him, unrelenting. The next morning, Mark woke up to the sound of his phone buzzing again. It was a text from Eleanor. "Have you made your decision? Time is running out." The pressure from her words hit him like a cold wave. His fingers hesitated over the keyboard, unsure of what to say. He'd barely slept, the thoughts of the offer swirling in his head. But what else could he do? The thought of his family's struggle, his own future in tatters, made it impossible to ignore. He quickly typed a reply, his fingers trembling as he pressed send. "I'll meet you today at 7 p.m. As the evening drew near, Mark found himself standing in front of the bistro again, the rain still falling in a steady rhythm. His heart raced as he stepped inside, the familiar warmth of the cafe welcoming him, but his mind was far from calm. Eleanor was already seated at their usual table, her poised demeanor almost intimidating under the soft lights. She didn't look up immediately, but when she did, there was a glint in her eyes, something sharp and calculating. "Mr. Davis," she said smoothly, her voice as calm and collected as ever. "I'm glad you decided to join me." Mark took a deep breath, pulling out the chair and sitting down across from her. He met her gaze, trying to steady his nerves. "I've been thinking about your offer," he began, his voice low. Eleanor nodded, her eyes never leaving his face. "And," she prompted. He swallowed hard, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. "I'll do it," he said quietly. The words felt foreign, almost like they belonged to someone else. "I'll marry you." Eleanor's lips curled into a faint smile, but there was no joy in it, only business. "Good," she said, her voice crisp. "You won't regret this. The arrangement will take care of everything. Your debts, your future." She handed him a sleek folder, its contents sealed tightly. Mark glanced at it, feeling the tension build in his chest. "What's next?" he asked. Eleanor leaned forward, her hands folding neatly on the table. "We'll finalize the details soon. But for now, let's go over the ground rules." Mark's mind raced as she laid out the terms. No love, no intimacy, just a business arrangement. The details were clear. He was to pose as her husband for appearances, attend events, and take part in a few social obligations. But there were no expectations beyond that. No sleeping together, no genuine connection. Mark's head spun as he listened. It all felt so cold, so detached. But what was the alternative? His mother's voice echoed in his head, reminding him of how desperate they were for a solution. Eleanor continued, oblivious to Mark's internal struggle. "You will attend my family's events, represent me in public, and handle a few of my business meetings. In exchange, I'll pay off your debts and ensure you have everything you need. A new start." She paused, studying him carefully. "Do you understand?" Mark nodded slowly, though doubt still lingered in his mind. "I understand," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. The deal was sealed, but something about it still didn't sit right with him. He could already sense the disconnect between them, the coldness in Eleanor's eyes, and the distance that would only grow between them. But for his family, for his future, it was a risk he had to take. As the evening continued, Eleanor gave him the contract to sign, a formality to make everything official. Mark's hand trembled as he put pen to paper, sealing a deal he knew would change his life forever. The words blurred in his vision as he signed, his thoughts drifting. What had he just agreed to? A marriage, built on paper, held together by broken promises and empty rules. Was this the path he was really willing to walk? The days that followed were a blur for Mark. After signing the contract, everything seemed to move at a pace he couldn't quite keep up with. Eleanor's world was nothing like his own. She was a woman who had everything, wealth, power, and the kind of control that Mark had never even dreamed of. For the first time in his life, he was part of that world, even if it was just for show. He attended her family events, business meetings, and lavish dinners, all the while knowing that he was just a pawn in her game. Every time they were together, Eleanor remained distant, polite but cold, never once showing any sign of warmth. He wondered if she even knew what it meant to be truly loved, or if she was too caught up in her own empire to care. It was at one of these events, a high-profile charity gala, where Mark began to feel the weight of his decision. The ballroom was packed with people, all dressed to the nines, mingling and laughing like old friends. Mark, on the other hand, stood off to the side, his suit feeling heavier with every passing minute. Eleanor was across the room, speaking with a group of businessmen, her posture perfect, her smile flawless. She looked every bit the powerful woman she was. Mark couldn't help but feel out of place. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was just a temporary fixture, a stand-in for a life he could never have. As the evening went on, Eleanor's eyes met his across the room. She raised an eyebrow, as if silently telling him to join her. Mark hesitated for a moment, then slowly made his way over. When he reached her side, she turned to him with that same calm expression, as though nothing was unusual. "I need you to help me with something," she said softly, her voice low enough that only he could hear. Mark nodded, unsure of what she meant. "You're going to speak with that investor," she continued, nodding toward a well-dressed man who stood nearby. "And make sure he's impressed. We need his support for the merger." Mark glanced at the investor, who was chatting with another guest. "How do you want me to do that?" he asked, his voice tentative. Eleanor smiled slightly, her gaze still fixed on him. "Just be yourself. You're my husband. Act like it." Mark swallowed hard. He had no idea how to act like a husband to a woman he barely knew. He was still adjusting to the idea that they were even married, let alone in public as a married couple. But Eleanor seemed to expect him to play his part without question, as though their arrangement was the most natural thing in the world. So, Mark did what he could. He walked up to the investor, smiled, and started a conversation. It wasn't easy, but he managed to keep it going, talking about business and the potential of the merger. To his surprise, the investor seemed to respond positively, nodding along and even laughing at a few of Mark's jokes. For a brief moment, Mark forgot about the contract and felt, just for a second, that maybe he was more than just a puppet in Eleanor's world. After the event, Eleanor found him again, this time in a quieter part of the venue. She was standing by a large window, staring out at the city skyline, her face unreadable. Mark approached her cautiously, unsure of what to expect. "You did well tonight," she said without turning around. "The investor is impressed. He's going to back the merger." Mark felt a small sense of pride, but it quickly faded when he realized how hollow the praise felt. "Thanks," he muttered. Eleanor finally turned to face him, her eyes scanning his face for a moment. "I know this isn't easy for you," she said, her voice softer than usual. "But remember, this is just business. It's not supposed to be personal." Mark nodded, but inside, something stirred. Was it really just business? Or was he starting to feel something more? He couldn't ignore the way she looked at him sometimes, the fleeting moments where her gaze seemed to soften, just for a split second. He wondered if she, too, was beginning to question their arrangement. The next few days were more of the same. Mark continued to play the role of the perfect husband at Eleanor's side, attending meetings and events, always following her lead. But as the days passed, the walls between them started to feel more and more like a prison. He was beginning to see that Eleanor's world wasn't as perfect as it seemed. She was a woman who had everything, yet she appeared to be missing something fundamental, real connection. And Mark? He was starting to wonder if he was missing it too. He had agreed to this arrangement because he had no other choice. But now, he couldn't help but wonder if he was falling into a trap of his own making. What would happen when the contract ended? What if he wanted more than just the business deal they had? One evening, after another exhausting day of pretending, Mark found himself sitting alone in their penthouse. The city lights outside glimmered like stars, but inside, it felt cold, empty. Eleanor was out, as usual, attending another event. Mark sighed and took a seat on the couch, staring out at the view. His phone buzzed on the coffee table, breaking the silence. He picked it up, his heart skipping a beat when he saw the message. It was from his mother. "We need to talk. It's urgent." Mark's stomach dropped. What could be so urgent? He quickly typed a reply, asking what was wrong. The reply came almost instantly. "It's about your father's debts. The bank is threatening to take the house." Mark felt a sharp pang in his chest. He had thought he was doing the right thing, marrying Eleanor, securing a future for himself and his family. But now, with the threat of losing everything, he realized how much he had put at stake. He put the phone down and ran his hands through his hair. The life he had chosen was starting to crumble around him, and he wasn't sure how much longer he could keep up the act. Eleanor's world was seductive, but it was also isolating. He was beginning to feel more alone than he ever had before. But what could he do? What choice did he have? Mark paced around the penthouse, his mind racing after reading the message from his mother. The pressure of the situation seemed unbearable. He had taken this step, marrying Eleanor, believing it was the only way to secure his family's future, to escape the crushing weight of debt. Yet here he was, feeling more trapped than ever. The promise of financial security that came with the marriage now felt hollow. His phone buzzed again, pulling him out of his thoughts. This time, it was Eleanor. "I need to talk to you. Meet me at the office," her text said. Mark's heart sank. He wasn't sure what he dreaded more, the business side of their arrangement or the coldness that had settled between them. He glanced at the clock. It was late, but he knew better than to ignore her. With a deep breath, he grabbed his jacket and headed out, his mind still tangled in a web of confusion and uncertainty. The drive to Eleanor's office felt longer than usual. The streets, bathed in the glow of streetlights, seemed to mirror the emptiness he felt inside. When he arrived, the office building loomed above him, cold and imposing. Eleanor was already inside, waiting for him. She was sitting at her desk, her face lit by the glow of her laptop, but her expression was unreadable. When she looked up, Mark could see the tension in her eyes. "You're late," she said, her voice as controlled as ever. Mark stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "Sorry," he muttered. "I was thinking." Eleanor studied him for a moment, then gestured for him to sit. "We need to discuss the future of this arrangement," she said, her tone steady but firm. Mark sat across from her, his stomach tightening. He didn't know what was coming, but he had a sinking feeling it wasn't going to be good. "I've been reviewing the merger deal," Eleanor continued. "It's almost finalized, but there are a few loose ends. I need you to step up more. We can't afford any mistakes now." Mark nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure what stepping up meant in this context. Eleanor's demands were always so vague, and no matter how hard he tried, he never quite felt like he was fully in the picture. He was playing the role she needed him to play, but it was beginning to feel like a performance, one that was draining the life out of him. "What do you want me to do?" Mark asked, his voice quieter now, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, her gaze never leaving his. "I need you to convince the board members that this merger is in their best interest. We've already made great strides, but your involvement is crucial now. It will show them we're united, that we're a team." Mark swallowed hard. He hadn't realized how much was riding on his role. He had assumed Eleanor's empire was already solid. But now, sitting in front of her, he realized how precarious everything was. For the first time, he saw the cracks in her polished facade. "I don't know if I can do this," Mark said, the words escaping before he could. "Stop them. I'm not like you, Eleanor. I don't belong in this world." Eleanor's expression softened, just slightly. For a moment, Mark thought he saw something flicker in her eyes, but it was gone in an instant. "You're more like me than you think," she replied, her voice lower now, less cold. "I made this empire from nothing. I built it all on my own. You're just as capable, Mark. You just need to trust yourself." Mark stared at her, unsure of how to respond. Her words were meant to be encouraging, but they felt more like an expectation than a reassurance. "But that's the problem, Eleanor," he muttered. "I don't trust myself. I've been pretending for so long. I don't know who I am anymore." Eleanor stood up, walking over to the window. "You're not the only one pretending, Mark," she said quietly, her back to him. "Sometimes I wonder if anyone really knows who they are in this world. We all wear masks. We all hide behind something." Mark felt a strange pang in his chest. For a moment, he saw a different side of Eleanor. The woman who had built this empire, yes, but also someone who was perhaps as lost as he was. "I'm just trying to survive," Mark said softly, his words almost lost in the quiet of the office. "I didn't ask for any of this." Eleanor turned to face him again, her expression unreadable. "Neither did I," she replied. "But we make choices, and those choices shape our lives. You've chosen this life, just as I have. You signed a contract, Mark. You chose to be part of this world, and now you have to see it through." Her voice was firm once again, but there was something else in it now, something that made Mark pause. He couldn't quite place it, but it felt almost like a challenge. "I just want to know if there's any way out," Mark said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't think I can keep doing this if it's just for the money." Eleanor didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked back to her desk, sitting down in her chair. "There's always a way out, Mark," she said after a long pause, her eyes fixed on him. "But the question is, what will you do once you're free? What will you have left?" Mark didn't know how to answer. He had no answer. He was trapped in this arrangement, this marriage that wasn't really a marriage. He had made a deal, but now, standing in Eleanor's office, he wasn't sure if the price he had paid was worth it. Mark sat silently in the chair, his mind racing after Eleanor's words. There was always a way out, she had said. But what would he have left once he was free? The question lingered in the air like a heavy weight, making it hard for him to breathe. He had agreed to this marriage because he thought it was the only way to secure his family's future. But now, with every passing day, he felt like he was losing more of himself. Every time he spoke with Eleanor, every time he played the part of her perfect husband, he felt further away from the man he once was. That night, Mark lay in their bed, staring at the ceiling, the quiet hum of the city outside filling the silence in the room. Eleanor was still out, attending another event, leaving him alone to grapple with his thoughts. The emptiness in the penthouse seemed to echo his own feelings. Everything around him was luxurious and polished, but none of it felt real. The life he was living, the deal he had made, none of it felt authentic. He was just a placeholder in a world that didn't belong to him. His phone buzzed again, breaking the silence. It was a message from his mother. The bank is threatening to foreclose on the house. They say we have one more week. Mark closed his eyes, the weight of his family's situation hitting him like a punch to the gut. He had made this deal with Eleanor, hoping it would solve everything. But now it felt like he was running out of time. The pressure was mounting, and he didn't know how much longer he could keep pretending. When Eleanor finally returned home, Mark was sitting in the living room, his mind still lost in a maze of conflicting thoughts. She entered the room, her heels clicking sharply against the floor, a slight frown on her face as she noticed his pensive expression. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice cold but with a hint of concern, perhaps the first Mark had heard from her in a while. Mark took a deep breath and turned to face her. "I got a message from my mother," he said quietly. "The bank is threatening to take the house. They say we have 1 week." Eleanor's eyes flickered with something. Was it concern, or just the recognition of a problem that needed to be dealt with? She sighed, walking over to him and sitting down on the couch beside him. "We'll handle it," she said matter-of-factly. "I'll take care of it." Mark looked at her, a mix of frustration and desperation in his eyes. "You don't understand," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't just about money anymore. It's about everything, my family, my life. I don't know how much longer I can keep playing this role, Eleanor. I don't know who I'm becoming." Eleanor didn't respond right away. She sat there, her expression unreadable, before finally speaking. "You don't have to play any role," she said, her voice softer now. "You're doing this because it's the only way to get what you want. We both are. We're in this together, whether you like it or not." Mark shook his head, his frustration growing. "This isn't the life I wanted," he said, his voice shaking. "I thought marrying you would give me a way out, but now I'm more trapped than ever." Eleanor's gaze softened, just for a moment, as she reached out and touched his hand. "I never promised you an easy way out," she said quietly. "But I did promise to help you, to give you the chance you needed. And you're not alone in this." Mark looked at her hand on his, feeling the warmth of her touch, but also the distance that still remained between them. He wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that this marriage, this arrangement, could somehow turn into something real. But deep down, he wasn't sure anymore. Was he really helping his family, or was he just sinking deeper into a life that wasn't his? He pulled his hand away slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," Mark said quietly. "I don't know if I can keep pretending that everything is okay." Eleanor stood up, taking a step back from him. "You're not pretending, Mark. You're just learning how to play the game. And right now, that's all that matters. You're in this, whether you like it or not. And so am I." She turned away from him, walking toward the window. "You're not the only one who feels trapped, you know. This isn't easy for me either. But I'm not going to back down. Neither should you." Mark sat there in silence, her words echoing in his mind. He didn't know if he was ready to keep playing this game, or if he could even continue pretending that this life was what he wanted. But as Eleanor's words sank in, he realized that maybe, just maybe, there was no way out. He had made his choice, and now he had to live with it. The days after Eleanor's words weighed heavily on Mark. He had thought that perhaps he could escape from this life he had found himself trapped in, but the more he tried to find a way out, the deeper he seemed to sink into the role he was playing. The marriage was not real, at least, not in the way he had imagined. It was a business arrangement, a contract, a way to survive. But as the weeks went by, Mark started to wonder if survival was all he was doing. Was he living? Or was he just going through the motions, pretending to be someone he wasn't? Eleanor remained as distant as ever, though there were moments, brief, fleeting moments, when her gaze softened, when the hardness in her eyes would disappear, and he would see a glimpse of something else. Was it vulnerability? Or just a reflection of the coldness she had built around herself? Mark wasn't sure, but it didn't matter. They were bound by this contract, by their shared goal of maintaining appearances and nothing more. One evening, after another long day of attending events with Eleanor, Mark found himself sitting in their penthouse again, feeling more alone than ever. The view of the city from their window was breathtaking, but the beauty of it didn't reach him. He sat there, staring out at the lights below, thinking about his family and the promise he had made to Eleanor. He had wanted to change everything, to give them a better future, but instead, he felt like he was losing himself in the process. His phone buzzed, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was another message from his mother. The bank is going to take the house if we don't come up with something soon. We're running out of time. Mark's stomach tightened as he read the message. It was the same urgency, the same sense of impending doom. How had he ended up here? He had agreed to marry Eleanor, thinking it would fix everything. But now, he realized, he had made a deal with the devil. He was stuck in a life that wasn't his, and he didn't know how to get out. Eleanor entered the room just then, her heels clicking sharply on the floor as she made her way toward him. "We need to talk," she said, her tone as cool as ever. Mark turned toward her, his expression a mixture of frustration and resignation. "About what?" he asked, trying to mask the fatigue in his voice. Eleanor took a seat beside him on the couch, her posture as perfect as always. "The merger," she said simply. "It's going through, but there are some issues that need to be addressed. I need you to step up. Your involvement is more crucial now than ever." Mark sighed, rubbing his temples. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," he admitted. "I don't know how much longer I can pretend that this is what I want." Eleanor glanced at him, her eyes softening for just a moment before the wall went back up. "You're not pretending, Mark. You're doing exactly what we agreed on. You're playing the role you need to play, and you're good at it. I wouldn't have married you if I didn't think you could handle it." Mark's jaw clenched as he looked at her. "That's the problem, Eleanor. I'm not sure I can handle it anymore. I'm not sure I want to handle it." There was a pause, a long moment where neither of them spoke. Eleanor sat back, her gaze fixed on the city outside the window. "I didn't promise you an easy life," she said finally, her voice low. "I didn't promise you happiness, Mark. But I did promise you a chance to fix everything, to make things right. That's all I can offer. And if you can't handle that, if you can't handle the reality of this life we're living, then maybe you should rethink whether you want to be here." Mark felt a lump form in his throat as he heard her words. Was that it? Was this really what his life had become? A series of empty promises and broken dreams? He thought back to the days before all this, when he had a future, when things weren't so complicated. But the truth was, he had no other choice now. He had already made his decision. He had already signed the contract, already agreed to this life, and there was no turning back. "I'm not sure I know how to be part of this world anymore," Mark said quietly, his voice tinged with frustration. "I don't know if I can keep pretending that I'm happy, that this is what I want." Eleanor stood up, her heels clicking once again as she moved toward the window. "No one said you had to be happy," she said, her back still turned to him. "This isn't about happiness. This is about survival. This is about getting what we both need. And if you're not willing to fight for that, then maybe you're right. Maybe you don't belong here." Mark felt his heart sink as he heard her words. He had come to this point thinking he was doing the right thing, that he was doing it for his family. But now he wasn't so sure. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that Eleanor was right. He had signed up for this life. He had made the choice. And now, all he could do was follow through, even if it meant losing himself in the process. As Eleanor stood by the window, looking out over the city, Mark felt the weight of his decision bear down on him. He had made his bed, and now he had to lie in it. There was no way out, no way to turn back. He was stuck in a life he never wanted, but one that he had created for himself. The days that followed were tense, each one heavier than the last. Mark continued to play the role of the perfect husband, attending events, making public appearances with Eleanor, But the cracks in their marriage, if it could even be called that, grew more evident with each passing day. Eleanor remained as cold and distant as ever, her every word carefully calculated, her actions always precise. There were moments when Mark wondered if she even saw him as anything more than a tool to further her ambitions. He had never felt more invisible. One evening, after another gala where he was expected to smile, shake hands, and play his part, Mark found himself sitting alone in their penthouse once more, staring out at the city skyline. The night was quiet, save for the hum of traffic below. He leaned back in the chair, feeling the weight of exhaustion press down on him. He had been pretending for so long that he almost couldn't remember who he used to be. Was this really what he wanted? He couldn't stop thinking about his family, the promises he had made to them, the hope that he could fix everything. But now, with every passing day, he felt like he was losing himself more and more. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Mark looked up, his heart sinking. Eleanor had returned, as usual, from another event. She stepped inside, her face unreadable, her eyes scanning the room as she made her way over to him. There was something different in her demeanor tonight, something that made Mark sit up straighter, his anxiety building. "We need to talk," Eleanor said, her voice firm but not unkind. Mark swallowed hard, feeling a knot form in his stomach. "About what?" he asked, his voice cautious. Eleanor didn't immediately respond. She walked over to the window, staring out at the view for a moment before turning to face him. "I've been thinking," she began slowly. "About us. About this arrangement." Mark's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't sure what she meant, but the way she said it didn't sound good. He waited for her to continue. "I never wanted you to think this was easy," Eleanor said, her tone softening slightly. "I know I've been distant, and I know I haven't made it easy for you. But the truth is, I'm in this just as much as you are." Mark looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" he asked. Eleanor sighed, her gaze drifting back to the city lights outside. "I built this empire, Mark. I built everything I have. And now, it feels like I'm losing control. This marriage was supposed to be a solution, but I can't help but feel that it's just one more thing I can't control." Mark's mind raced. For the first time, he saw a glimpse of vulnerability in her eyes. It was brief, fleeting, but it was there. He had always seen her as someone strong, someone who had it all figured out, but now he realized that maybe she was just as lost as he was. "I'm not sure what you want me to say," Mark said quietly. "I never asked for any of this. I never asked to be part of your world, to live a life I didn't choose. I thought I was doing the right thing, but now I'm just stuck." Eleanor turned to face him fully now, her expression hardening once more. "I didn't ask for your pity, Mark," she said sharply. "I didn't marry you out of desperation. This was a business deal, and we both knew that from the start. You wanted to help your family, and I wanted to protect my legacy. But this isn't about pity. It's about what we do with the choices we've made." Mark stood up, pacing the room. "And what about us?" he asked, his voice rising. "What about the person I thought I was marrying? What about the future we were supposed to have?" Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "There is no future, Mark," she said coldly. "There's only today. There's only the deal we made and the obligations we must fulfill. You don't get to choose the future when you make a deal like this. You take what you're given." Mark felt the anger bubble up inside him, the frustration that had been building for weeks finally spilling over. "I didn't sign up for this," he shouted. "I didn't sign up to be your puppet. I didn't sign up for a marriage of convenience that feels more like a prison than anything else." Eleanor stood still for a moment, her face unreadable. Then, slowly, she walked toward him, her steps deliberate and calm. "You want a way out?" she asked quietly. "Fine. But I'm telling you right now, there is no way out of this. Not for me, and not for you. You made your choice when you signed that contract." Mark opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He felt his chest tighten, the reality of the situation crashing down on him. This was it. There was no turning back now. Eleanor was right. He had made his choice, and now, he had to live with the consequences. "You can either accept it," Eleanor said softly, "or you can walk away. But no. Walking away means losing everything. The choice is yours." And with that, she turned and left the room, leaving Mark standing there, the weight of her words sinking in. He was trapped, and for the first time in a long time, he wasn't sure what to do next. Mark sat in the penthouse, the weight of Eleanor's words still pressing down on him. She was right. He had made his choice when he signed the contract. But did that mean he had to live with the consequences forever? The thought of walking away, of leaving it all behind, was tempting. But the fear of losing everything, the house, his family's future, kept him rooted in place. He couldn't escape this life. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. But as he sat there, staring out at the city below, he realized something. He had lost his sense of self, but he hadn't lost his ability to choose. He still had the power to make a decision, even if it felt impossible. The next day, Mark found himself back in the conference room, sitting across from Eleanor. The air between them was thick with tension, but there was a quiet resolve in Mark's eyes now. He had come to a decision. He wasn't going to keep playing this game anymore. He had to make things right, not just for his family, but for himself. Eleanor glanced at him, her usual calm demeanor firmly in place. But there was a flicker of something in her eyes. "You've been distant lately," she said, her voice cool, but with a hint of curiosity. "What's going on, Mark?" Mark took a deep breath. It wasn't easy, but it was time to be honest. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," he began, his voice steady. "About there being no way out. But I don't think I can live like this anymore. I can't keep pretending that everything's okay when it's not. I'm tired, Eleanor. I'm tired of being a pawn in this game we're playing." Eleanor's eyes narrowed, her expression unreadable. "What are you saying?" she asked quietly, her tone sharp. Mark met her gaze, his resolve growing with every word he spoke. "I'm saying that I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I need to find a way to fix things, but I can't do it while I'm still trapped in this contract." For a moment, there was silence between them. Eleanor didn't speak, but Mark could see the wheels turning in her mind. He could almost hear her calculating her response, trying to figure out how to regain control of the situation. Finally, she spoke, her voice colder than before. "You think you can just walk away from this?" she asked, her tone sharp. "You signed a contract, Mark. You can't just undo that." Mark stood up, walking over to the window. The city sprawled below, the lights flickering in the distance. It looked so peaceful from here, so distant from the storm inside him. He turned back to face Eleanor. "Maybe I can't undo it, but I can change what happens next. I'm not going to live this life of empty promises anymore. I'm not going to be your perfect husband if it means losing who I am." Eleanor stood up as well, her expression hardening. "You don't understand, Mark," she said, her voice low and tight with control. "This isn't about you or me. This is about everything we've built. You can't just walk away from that." Mark shook his head, his voice firm. "I know what we've built, Eleanor, but I can't keep sacrificing my happiness for it. You're right, this marriage was a business deal, but I want more than that. I don't want to just be a part of your empire. I want a life that feels real." Eleanor's eyes flickered with something like uncertainty, though she quickly masked it. "And you think that's possible? After everything? After everything we've worked for?" Mark nodded slowly. "I don't know, but I have to try. I have to try and get back to who I was before all of this. I'm not asking for a perfect life, but I'm asking for a chance to make it my own." There was a long pause, and for the first time in a long time, Mark felt like he had said what needed to be said. Eleanor looked at him, her expression unreadable, but there was a shift in the air. He had laid it all out on the table. Now, the choice was hers. And as he stood there, waiting for her response, he realized that no matter what happened next, he had finally taken control of his own destiny. The silence between Mark and Eleanor stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Mark stood by the window, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Eleanor didn't speak right away, her gaze fixed on him, as though searching for something, trying to figure out if he was serious or if this was just another outburst. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet, but firm. "You think you can walk away from this? From everything we've built?" Her words were colder now, but there was something else behind them, something that was almost vulnerable. Mark turned to face her, his heart pounding in his chest. "I'm not walking away from everything, Eleanor. I'm walking away from a life that's been built on lies and contracts. I'm walking away from pretending that I'm someone I'm not." He paused, the gravity of what he was saying sinking in. "I've made a choice, and I have to live with it." Eleanor's expression softened for just a moment, the hardness in her eyes flickering like a fading light. She sighed, stepping closer to him. "I never wanted this to be a prison for you, Mark. I never meant for you to feel trapped. But sometimes, we do what we think we must to survive. I thought you understood that." Mark took a deep breath, his heart still heavy, but something had changed inside him. "I understand more than you think," he said quietly. "But I can't keep doing this. I need to find my own path, even if it's uncertain. I need to live my life on my own terms." For a moment, Eleanor was silent, as though processing everything he had said. Her eyes searched his face, studying him, as if deciding whether or not to accept his decision. The tension in the room felt thick, but Mark didn't back down. This was the choice he had made, and he wasn't going to let fear stop him. Eleanor finally spoke again, her voice softer than before, almost resigned. "I can't force you to stay, Mark. But I can't pretend this doesn't matter to me, either. This marriage, this arrangement, it was supposed to give us both what we needed. And now, you're telling me that it's not enough." Mark nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words. "It's not enough for me, Eleanor. And I think it's not enough for you either." He paused, letting the words sink in. "You've built this empire, but at what cost? You've built it alone. You've been alone. And now, so am I." Eleanor didn't respond right away. She just looked at him, her face unreadable. Mark could see the sadness there, deep in her eyes, but it wasn't a sadness born from weakness. It was the sadness of someone who had fought so hard for control, only to realize that control had cost her the one thing she truly needed: connection. The silence that followed was filled with unspoken understanding. Mark knew that leaving was the right thing for him, but he also knew that it would change everything for both of them. This wasn't just the end of a contract, it was the end of an illusion. The illusion that they could ever build something real on the foundation of a business deal. After a long pause, Eleanor finally spoke again, her voice steady, though it carried an unmistakable hint of sorrow. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Mark. I hope you find the peace you need." Mark nodded, a tight smile forming on his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Thank you, Eleanor. For everything, and for nothing." He turned to leave, his heart heavy but finally free from the chains of their arrangement. As Mark walked out of the penthouse, he felt a sense of finality wash over him. The world outside seemed brighter, the air fresher, as if he had stepped into a new chapter of his life. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was the one holding the pen. He was free to write his own story, one without contracts, without compromises. Just him, and the choices he would make from here on out.